Hey everybody, this video is going to be very intense. I want to say a warning right away up front. This video is going to be very graphic. There's going to be a lot of disturbing things. This video is difficult for, I would think, anybody to watch. So just please be aware of that. I want to give you plenty of time if you are, say, a child, someone that is younger, or if you're very sensitive, um, please consider not watching this video. If you're a kid and you want to, I don't know if you're bringing any of this to school to use as, refutations against like what's being taught in school. But if you are, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you talk with your parents, have them watch this video first, and then, either tell you about it or approve it. This video is very disturbing. This video is very dark, and this video is only this is here strictly for awareness, to show how real this stuff is, and to those that believe in this dark practice. So I just really wanted to make sure that this warning is very clear, very upfront. Please, please, please do not watch this video if you are very sensitive, if you are young, if this kind of thing makes you uneasy and unsettled. Please do not watch this video any further. I just want to add a prayer that anybody who watches this video has on the full armor of God, and is in full protection from any spiritual disturbings that might happen. Please have on the full armor of God and have Jesus Christ's protection. You have no reason to worry because Jesus Christ is greater than any enemy. Amen.
One of the things that's most important to me with my channel or channels is to constantly remind people of the wickedness in this world. I do it for two reasons. One, so that people understand what's going on and they're not naive to the enemy. And two, because it's a different way to lead people to pick up their Bible and to find Jesus Christ. I understand the perspective other people want me to be positive all the time, but I can't be somebody that I'm not. I see the wickedness all the time in this world, and I feel the need to constantly expose it, especially in a month like this, where Halloween is one of the most popular holidays there is, and people don't understand the real meaning behind Halloween. And really, the season for Halloween starts October 13th and runs to the 31st, and there are many, many rituals that occur, many, many sacrifices that occur, and I want people to be aware of this because abductions and things like that occur during this time period, and spiritual warfare is at its, it is at its peak during this time period, which means Christians are getting prayed against. They're getting spells casted upon them. And when most people hear that, they laugh and they're like, oh, spell casting, and they don't believe any of that stuff is real. When the Bible tells us this stuff is real, and we see it everywhere in front of us. And I'm going to show you something now that really should help people wake up to this, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I like to show some of these old school documentaries about this stuff that really breaks it down. And there's a reason that you need to see this, because you need to know the enemy. Now, is knowing the enemy going to get you closer to God? In some cases, it might. Is knowing the enemy going to give you salvation? In some cases, it might. Because knowing the enemy, some people who believe that the Bible is fiction and believe in evolution, when they see all the wickedness going on and see all the connections to Satan, it makes them realize that the Bible is actually real and evolution is fake, and all this stuff that we see constantly thrown at us is about the spiritual warfare between God and the devil. So take a look at this and let me know what you think in the comment section. It's a bit long, but it's definitely worth it. It's definitely a good watch. You can watch it in pieces. Check it out.
Kids in the occult. 1. Kids in the occult. 2. Kids in the occult. 3. Kids in the occult. 4. Kids in the occult. 5. Kids in the occult. 6. Kids in the occult. 7. Kids in the occult. 8. Kids in the occult. 9. Kids in the occult. 10. Kids in the occult. 11. Kids in the occult. 12. Kids in the occult. 13. Kids in the occult. 14. Kids in the occult. 15. Kids in the occult. 16. Kids in the occult. 17. Kids in the occult. 18. Kids in the occult. 19. Kids in the occult. 20. Kids in the occult. 21. Kids in the occult. 22. Kids in the occult. 23. Kids in the occult. 24. Kids in the occult. 25. Kids in the occult. 26. Kids in the occult. 27. Kids in the occult. 28. Kids in the occult. 29. Kids in the occult. 30. Kids in the occult. 31. Kids in the o walked into their bedroom wearing just a pair of black underwear after doing a ritual that night. And I shot them both in the head as they slept. And I remember feeling like someone had just picked this big rock up off my shoulders, like all the burdens of the world had been gone from me, like relief, you know. And I laughed, I giggled hysterically. I had sold my soul to the devil. And so I felt, and I was told, once you do that, hey, that's it. I don't care if you want out or not, you can't get out.
The young man you just saw and heard, Sean Sellers, a friend of mine. His grandfather's a friend of mine. He's on death row in McAllister, Oklahoma. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in just a few moments. He stood at the foot of his mother and stepfather's bed after he had performed a satanic ritual and murdered them. He laughed, he giggled. I'll tell you more about him in a few minutes. But what we're going to be doing on this particular video for your protection and for the protection of your family is attempting to give you what we call a gestalt, or an overview of the occult, not just Satanism. For there are many people who erroneously believe that the only occult group in the world is Satanism. And true Satanism is an occult. We're not going to be discussing cults, but rather occults. We will be covering in this session together what we call 4 disciplines that relate to the occult. We're going to be discussing history, occult history. We're going to be discussing criminal justice. We will be discussing behavioral science. Then we will bring into it the belief system of the theology of the occult. Now, I'm not going to stop and tell you this is history, or this is a belief system, or this is behavioral science. You will recognize it when it comes up on the screen and as we go through the video and go through our presentation. But it's very important when you begin to talk about or learn about the occult to get an overview. There are things involved in the occult that cannot be explained outside of that which is spiritual. Law enforcement and behavioral science and educators make a mammoth mistake when they separate the spiritual part of the occult from their particular discipline. So I'm going to try to include all of them so you will be able to get a good overview of the subject. There are some things, however, that you need to understand before we get into the very heart and the meat of the subject. Let me explain to you that the Church of Satan, the Temple of Set, the Church of Wicca, which is the Witches International Coven Council Association, Santeria, the Worldwide Church of Satanic Liberation, the Process Church of Final Judgment. Only a few of those we're going to be mentioning in our seminar together, but every one of those groups, occult churches, each one of them are protected by the Constitution of the United States. They have a right to believe what they believe. They have a right to worship the way they want to worship, perform the rituals they want to perform, and they are highly organized. They have computer networks, they have magazines, they have publications, they have membership rosters, they have membership drives. They are highly organized. But what you need to understand is that they are protected by the Constitution, just like your church. If you are a Baptist or a Catholic or Methodist or an Assembly of God, whatever church you're affiliated with has a constitutional protection. So do these bizarre occult churches. And then another thing you need to understand is something a little bit about their belief system. On page 25 or 27, I forget exactly which, in the Satanic Bible, there is listed what is known as the 9 satanic verses. The heart of their belief system is incorporated into the 9 satanic verses. And I'm not going to go over all of them at this time, but there are 2 of them that you do need to understand in order to understand what we're going to be viewing and talking about over the next couple of hours. Satanic verse number 1 says this: Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Now think about that. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Now that comes out of an old Crowley philosophy of do what thou wilt, for this is the whole pleasure of man, or the whole purpose of man. Do whatever you want to do. Whatever your senses tell you is all right to do, then it is all right for you to do it. It doesn't make any difference if it violates the law, and this is the very epitome of rebellion. And the Bible tells us in the book of 1 Samuel that rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. It is anarchy. Whenever a person literally casts aside any restraint to do whatever they want to do, and their belief system tells them that it is all right, then that is anarchy. Another satanic verse that I want you to understand is satanic verse number 7, which simply says, Satan represents man as just another animal. Sometimes better, more often worse than those who walk on four legs, who because of his divine, spiritual, and intellectual development has become the most vicious animal of all. You see, Satanists view man as an animal. The value of man is reflected by a copper penny. Often in criminal investigations, we find copper pennies at the scene of a human sacrifice or an animal sacrifice. It represents the value of life. But Satanists view man as nothing more than an animal. Now, they do that for a number of reasons. One reason is because it anesthetizes their conscience. Whenever they are offering a human sacrifice, whether it is a young person, adult, or a child, when they stretch that human sacrifice upon the altar, they are really not viewing a human, but they are rather viewing an animal. And so it anesthetizes their conscience. They also believe that man is an animal because they reflect in their levels of authority within the church of Satan animal heads. The larger the animal head, the larger the animal, then the more power they possess within their belief system. And here is something else that you need to understand before we begin to get to the heart of the teaching. Satanist cult and occult groups do not care whether you believe they exist or not. You see, the truth is, they believe they exist. They know they exist. And they would rather you not even know they exist or know they are functioning so freely in our society. They know they exist. And that is the dangerous part about the occult. Now, as we get into this teaching, what we have is a seminar on occult awareness. I am not interested in the seminar panicking anybody. It is not a panic seminar or panic teaching. It is a teaching on awareness. You need to be aware that these groups exist. You need to be aware of their belief system, where they're coming from, in order to be able to understand exactly why they do what they do when they do it. This is a seminar really on overt spiritual warfare. When your pastor stands up and preaches on warfare, we talk about that which is on the inside, and Paul the Apostle refers to it in his writings, the battle of the mind and the things I want to do, Paul said I don't do, and the things I ought to be doing I'm not doing. And there's that raging conflict that goes on inside of the believer. Good against evil, the old sin nature warring against the new man. And all of this is warfare, but it is internal warfare. It is covert warfare. But when we begin to talk about the occult and Satanism, we are talking about exposing principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, and spiritual wickedness in high places that are now manifesting themselves through organized occult churches. No longer, therefore, are principalities and powers and rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places abstract. They are tangible, operating through men who are demonically possessed and possess a demonic belief system that are operating through organized churches that have constitutional protection, and they are recruiting our young people. The seminar objectives are to exalt the Savior, because Jesus is Lord. Whether you make Him Lord or not, He is Lord. And to expose Satanism through this teaching, we're going to tear the sheet off of Satanism and give you the most brutal picture of some of the most bizarre groups that are operating in the United States of America. And then thirdly, to equip the saints of God. When we finish this, we hope that you will be equipped enough to recognize the signs of the occult and recognize the symptoms of them, maybe even in your children. For you see, the understandable enemies of the child of God are the world and the flesh. And when we say that the world is the enemy, we mean the world system. that is anti-God, anti-Bible, anti-Christ, anti-Christian, anti-blood of Jesus, anti-anything that is spiritual, the world system. And you can see that enemy. That enemy of the world is all around you in publications and television and Hollywood and crime and punishment. And you see it all around you. It is tangible. The flesh, you know that you are your own worst enemy. Often we say that Satan is the worst enemy of man. You are your own worst enemy. The flesh, the old sin nature of man, is the worst enemy. But the mysterious, invisible enemy of man, enemy of the child of God, is the devil. And Satan is operating through people. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, the entry of his teaching, and the entry that he uses for the child of God, the battlefield of the mind, with his intent and his goal to steal, kill, and to destroy. You see, if he can steal your attention, if he can capture your attention and divert you, distract you from Christ. Anything that distracts from Christ is of the occult. Whether it is a patron saint, a statue, whether it is a building, whether it is a book, anything that will distract you from Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, is of the occult, because the devil wants to steal your attention. He wants to kill your spiritual senses. He wants to make you spiritually insensitive to the things of God and the reality of God. He wants to destroy your life, your influence, and your relationship. And the devil is doing more now to destroy the relationship of the family through the occult than any other medium he has. With that in mind, we're going to go to probably the oldest, the most authentic symbol of Satanism that I have been able to come up with in my 15 years of research. What you're now looking at on the screen is Baphomet, or the horned hunter, as it is called. You will observe that this drawing has the body of both a man and a woman. It has the head of a goat, the wings of an angel. There is a black crescent moon. There is a white crescent moon. The figure has cloven hooves and is actually seated between heaven and earth, as if to rule both heaven and earth. But what we want to focus on in this particular symbol, because all of the drawing has symbolic meaning, but what we want to focus on is the goat head. Some people have asked me, Paul, why don't the Satanists use a serpent as their symbol? Because the Bible says in the Old Testament that a serpent beguiled Eve. Nakish is the Hebrew word, which really doesn't mean serpent. It actually means secret or occultic in nature. Another reason they use the goat head is because in the New Testament, Christ is known as the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And therefore, the opposite of the lamb is the goat. So they actually use the goat head as a symbol of their religion. What you're looking at now happens to be a real, authentic satanic priest in a graveyard performing a satanic ritual. That happens to be grave dirt. This was taken, by the way, with a law enforcement surveillance camera, and this priest is wearing a papier-mâché goat head and has on his hands papier-mâché cloven hooves. Interesting. When I was doing a seminar over in Louisiana, a lady came to me during our break, halfway through our seminar, who had seen this slide that I'd shown. And she was panicky, wanted to know where in the world I came up with that slide. And I asked her why she wanted to know. And she said because she had moved to Louisiana from Florida. She was a third-generation Satanist. Her grandparents and her parents were Satanists, and she was raised in a satanic setting as a generational Satanist. And she had developed MPD as a defense mechanism, and she was in treatment and trying to get her daughter out of it. And she went through the whole story, of the whole bizarre story of her involvement from a childhood in the occult and in Satanism. And she said, the picture you showed on the screen looked exactly like my high priest. I assured her that this did not come from Florida. However, it is typical of some of the rituals that the high priests are involved in. We're going to identify the groups. One of the first things I want to do is to try to tell you and share with you who these people are and a little bit about what they believe. What you're now looking at on the screen is a man by the name of Aleister Crowley. He was born in England in 1875 into a Plymouth Brethren family. His father, as a matter of fact, was a Plymouth Brethren minister of the gospel. His mother was a very fine Christian. But when he was very young, he rebelled against the teaching of his mother and his father and embraced the religions of the dark side, as he chose to call it. He went to the library and checked out books, studied until he became very proficient. He even had tattooed on his forehead, and I've accented it there so you can see it properly, but he had tattooed on his forehead 666 because his mother, when he was very young, because of his bizarre lifestyle, started calling him the Beast. And that nickname, the Beast, followed him for the rest of his life. But then he became a leader in the occult that was known as the OTO and the Order of the Golden Dawn in England. He is a priest here in this picture performing a ritual. He began writing books. As the leader of this particular cult, he began writing books, and one of the most famous books he wrote was Magic, M-A-G-I-C-K, spelled with a K, in theory and in practice, which became a bestseller all over Europe. This book became sort of a guidebook or a primer for occult belief and practices all over Europe. Now, in 1945, I believe it was, he came to the United States of America and brought this book with him, and it became a bestseller in America. The man died a raving maniac, not even able to pronounce his own name, in 1947. But what you need to understand is the writings in this book lived on. They had a profound, penetrating effect on the occult movement in the United States of America. The book you're looking at, with all of its markings in it and all of its notes in it, belonged to this young man. Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer, when he was captured by the police after his crime spree, he admitted that he was a disciple of Aleister Crowley and said himself that his philosophy was do what thou wilt, for this is the whole purpose of man. And he committed his crimes based upon the Crowley philosophy. Over his bed, when he was finally arrested, he had taken the occult symbols, some of the occult symbols, out of Aleister Crowley's writings and made them into a collage, and adopted even some of the names that were associated with the writings of Aleister Crowley, and put them around the collage so that it would be a constant reminder of his identification with the occult. So Aleister Crowley died, but his writings did not die. Something very interesting, in 1967, April the 30th, 1967, in a house in San Francisco, California, a man by the name of Anton LaVey, who was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, established what is known as the First Church of Satan. Now, up until that time, there had never been an organized Church of Satan. But this man, and tell you just a little bit about his background, when he began the First Church of Satan, he was actually a police photographer, rather brilliant in his field, but he had studied the occult and had studied many of the writings of Aleister Crowley, and he incorporated them into a seminar. And when he was teaching a seminar one night, a police captain left the seminar and just in passing said, "You have enough information to establish your own church." And so he did. He established the First Church of Satan. And the slide you're now looking at is this man who is the high priest and head of the Church of Satan. You also will see in the slide the papier-mâché animal head, which covers the head of his daughter. His daughter is second in command in the Church of Satan, and the size of the animal head actually reflects her authority within the church of Satan. This is their seal. The seal of the church of Satan is an upside-down star. Now remember, in the Bible, there was a star that marked the birthplace of Christ. So this is a mockery of that star. It is upside down, and inside of that star, upside down star, is a goat head. The horns and the whiskers and the chin. In the circle, in the outer circle, there are Egyptian occult markings and alpha Egyptian letters from their Egyptian alphabet. But this is the church seal. This is not a pentagram, but the seal of the church of Satan. This is the high priest himself with a coffin to the left, where he is actually performing a ritual, or rather presiding over a ritual. This is an interesting picture of Mr. LaVey, who is on a lecture tour. You notice he has on a clerical collar around his neck. Of course, the red that you see is the seal of the church of Satan, but the clerical collar. Now, why in the world would this man wear a clerical collar if he is a priest, a high priest of the church of Satan? Very simple. Universally, the clerical collar has come to mean to the public a man who speaks for God. Therefore, whenever he puts on this clerical collar, it has a disarming effect. And he becomes more acceptable to a vulnerable public who is looking for something they don't know what they're looking for, and he can easily sweep them into his belief system and into his first church of Satan. These are some of his priests, and if you will notice in this particular slide, they have on the animal heads. But what you might not immediately notice are their knuckles. They're turned under so that their hands actually look like cloven hooves, because they believe, now remember, they believe man is nothing more than an animal, sometimes better, more often worse than those who walk on four legs. But because of man's spiritual and intellectual development, he has become the most vicious animal of all. But these papier-mâché animal heads actually reflect the level of authority within the church of Satan. It has great influence through their Bible. The book you're now looking at was written by Anton LaVey, the Satanic Bible. This one is the Satanic Ritual book, which is a companion to the Bible. This is probably the most dangerous book I've ever read. So dangerous that a prison warden, year before last, made the statement in a court trial because a prisoner had petitioned the court. The warden would not allow the prisoner to establish a church of Satan within the prison, and he petitioned the court, and the warden had to go to trial. And before the warden went to trial, brilliant man, before the warden went to trial, he went out and bought a copy of this book and read it. And he said in the trial, and it's in the transcript, it is the most dangerous book I've ever read. And anyone who reads it and believes it will rape, murder, rob, steal without conscience, and without conscience. And vengeance will be the disposition of his lifestyle. A very dangerous book. But we find this many times at an occult-related crime scene, especially among young people. There are many churches of Satan all over the United States. There's a large church of Satan in Fort Worth, Texas, where Channel 4, I believe it was, asked them to allow them to film one of their rituals a couple of years ago during Halloween. And this reporter was not allowed to film the ritual except in the dark. But he actually got to interview two young ladies after the ritual was over. He asked them this question: why are you Satanist? Both of these young ladies answered his question like this: we used to be Christians, but it's a whole lot more fun being Satanist. Now it reflects the satanic verse number 1. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Do whatever you want to do. If you're gonna have fun, then do it, and it is all right, because it falls within the parameters of the belief system of the Church of Satan. This is Death Row in McAlester, Oklahoma, where this young man lives. You saw him at the beginning of the presentation, Sean Sellers. Sean, very young, 7, 8 years old. His mother hired a babysitter to take care of him while they were gone. His mother and stepfather were gone. His mother did not know that the babysitter was a witch. She brought her books of witchcraft over to the house. She read them to Sean, and Sean became extremely fascinated by this. When the mother found out, she got rid of the babysitter and hired someone else, but the damage was done. So Sean went to the library when he was only 12, 13 years old and checked books out on Satanism and witchcraft and the occult and religions of the dark side and began to study them. He became involved in Dungeons and Dragons. He became involved in some little minor rituals with dolls and so forth, and began gradually getting deeper and deeper into Satanism until finally he even set up an altar in his room. He became a self-styled satanic priest. He gathered about him 7 young people from his high school. They would go out in the woods and perform rituals. And one day he told them that he had broken all the commandments but one, thou shalt not kill. And so he and another young man went out and murdered a convenience store clerk. And in doing that, he said, now I am free, I am free, I am free. And he wasn't caught for that crime. But then, after performing a ritual a couple of months later, in front of this altar that you're now looking at, you can see the goblet out of which he drank blood. You can see the candles that he burned. He went into a trance after the ritual. And when he woke up out of the trance, he walked into the bedroom of his mother and his stepfather, stood at the foot of the bed, and murdered both of them while they were asleep, and laughed and giggled as the blood splashed over his body. Then he went in and took a shower, changed clothes, went and told his friends what he had done. 2 days later, he was arrested for the homicide, and he is now on death row in McAlester, Oklahoma. However, I will tell you that when he was put in jail, he found a Bible, and he began reading that Bible, and the Lord Jesus Christ came into his life, and he's transformed. He's a fine Christian. He writes young people from death row and tries to help them come out of the occult and prevent them from getting involved in the occult. Now, I'm going to tell you that greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world if you're a child of God. And God has the power to deliver people from the occult and from Satanism. However, I must admit, that his conversion experience does not cancel out the crime he committed. You can't bring dead bodies back. What a horrible crime he committed, and he's on death row because of it. Satanism, the doctrine of the teaching of Satanism, became so pervasive in California that it penetrated the Hollywood scene. Here you see Jane Mansfield. This is not a film, by the way. This is not a movie. This is Jane Mansfield, who is actually participating in a ritual, and she's drinking blood from the hands of Anton LaVey, the founder of the First Church of Satan. She was deeply involved in the Church of Satan and was a very close friend of Anton LaVey. This is Dr. Michael Aquino you're now looking at. Aquino, I say doctor, he has a PhD, a very brilliant man. He's also a retired colonel from the military, Colonel Aquino. While he was in the military, his area of expertise was mind control. And many of those of us who are involved in criminal justice believe that the crimes of the 90s are going to be mind control crimes. But this man was a member of the Church of Satan. He and LaVey were very close friends, but they had a disagreement over the purity of rituals and some of the other realities of Satan. And he broke away and formed another church called the Temple of Set. It appeals to academia. He's a brilliant man, and he has a Bible that he calls his crystal tablets that is very lengthy and very decisive, and he appeals to a wealthy, intellectual, sophisticated group of people. Most of the time, when you find a temple of Set, it will be in a town where there is a large university or a large college. But his thing in the occult, and the word Set, by the way, means Satan. And he does worship Satan. His belief system basically is the same as the Church of Satan. It is just another satanic church. The man you're looking at now in the top part of your screen is Robert de Grimston. This man is the founder of the Process Church of Final Judgment, a bizarre group. They actually believe that Jesus and Satan are brothers, one representing good, the other representing evil, and that Christ pronounces judgment, but Satan actually carries out the judgment for him. They believe that when Christ comes the second time, Satan is going to come with him, and they're going to sit upon dual thrones and rule in the earth together. That's one part of their beliefs. Another part of their belief system is that the only way this corrupt world is ever going to be purified is with a bloodbath of insignificant people. Insignificant people include those who are not a part of the chosen, that is, their group. And people need to be slaughtered, not just killed, but slaughtered, and their blood drained from their body and poured into the dirt, the earth. And when enough blood of human beings has been soaked up by the earth, then the earth is going to be purified. That belief system is what influenced this man, Charles Manson, who was a member of the Process Church of Final Judgment. And as my understanding, he still is a member of the Process Church of Final Judgment. And those who are involved in the Process Church of Final Judgment say that when he gets out of prison, he is going to become their Messiah. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but it makes my blood run just a little bit cold to think that anyone so demonically possessed as this man could be the head of any belief system, any church that has such profound constitutional protection. You say, oh, well, he'll never get out of prison. That isn't true. 98% of everyone who goes to prison gets out of prison. He will get out of prison someday. When he does, then he will become the Messiah for the Process Church of Final Judgment. These are Santerias. Santeria priest. Santeria is a mixture in their belief system of Palamiambe, voodoo, witchcraft, black magic, and Catholicism. They believe in pronouncing curses. They use voodoo dolls to represent human beings so they can pronounce a curse on them. You say, well, Paul, does that work? And I'm telling you, yes, it does work. The powers of darkness can work and do work. And they have ways, if they do not work supernaturally, they have ways of seeing to it that they do work. But they pronounce curses on people. And they use voodoo dolls, nail them to the wall, and put sticks in the area of their heart so they will die. The slide you're looking at has a huge animal heart and a voodoo doll, and the animal heart represents a human heart where they're pronouncing a curse on someone. They believe in Satan. This particular Santeria priest is wearing a papier-mâché goat head that is the supreme symbol of Satanism. And there, of course, is a voodoo doll in front of him. One of the bizarre things about Santeria, and we call Santeria in criminal justice, they are known as a blood cult and they are known as a drug cult. But their belief system is so bizarre, though they believe in Satan, these skulls that you see painted different colors and with different designs represent 600 different deities that the Santeria Church actually worships. Now, Santeria was made famous in America and around the world by the Matamoros incident. Mark Kilroy, who was a student at Texas A&M University on spring break, went down to Matamoros for spring break and was abducted by the Santeria Church. They were looking for someone to use as a part of a ritual or human sacrifice, and they inadvertently chose Mark Kilroy, a young man, handsome young man. I know his mother and dad, Jim and Helen, who are doing a fine job in trying to combat drug abuse in America. But this young man was taken by the Santeria Church, disappeared, could not be found, and finally law enforcement did a noble job of finding him in this building, or I might say what was left of him in this building. And when they finally started examining and investigating the site, they dug up 12 other bodies that the Santerias had used parts of their body in some of their rituals. And I say parts of their bodies because only certain parts of the body to Santeria is sacred. For example, the thigh bone is they consider to be the most spiritual part of the body. And they will often kill someone just to get the thigh bone to use in their rituals, or they'll dig up a grave to get a particular body part to use in some of their rituals. But Santeria is a growing phenomenon in America, and they appeal to a very exclusive class of people in the United States. This happens to be the cauldron that was found at the site in Santeria. In Matamoros, the Santeria group. Inside of this cauldron, there was human blood, there was feces, human feces, there was a brain, there were parts of human thigh bones, and they call this a cauldron. And they believe, the Santerias believe, that inside of this cauldron is all of the wisdom of the Santero and or the high priest. And when they cook it and melt it all down and they get it all together and it cools off, then they drink it because they believe that it makes them invincible, and they are actually consuming the wisdom of the high priest and the Santero, part of their belief system. This is a Wiccan high priestess. Wicca. So many things I could say about the church of Wicca. The Witches International Coven Council. There are Alexandrian, Gardenian, historical, traditional Wiccans. I guess if I described Wicca in just a phrase, it would be levels of consciousness, for they believe in levels of consciousness. Also, they are both esoteric and pantheistic in their belief system. They believe in Mother Goddess, which is nature, and they also believe in the Horn Hunter. Mother Goddess, they use natural herbs and spices in their rituals, even in some of their sacraments. In some of their sacramental rituals, they use natural herbs and spices. You've heard people say, well, there's nothing wrong with Wicca because they believe in white magic. They don't believe in black magic, and people try to distinguish between white magic and black magic. But let me tell you something. According to the Word of God, there is only one kind of magic, and that is black magic. Do not be deceived, and do not allow your children to be deceived by believing that there is any such thing at all as white magic, or good magic as it is called. But they observe rituals. Sometimes they will do rituals what we call sky-clad, with no clothes. Sometimes they will have on some clothes or no clothes. But in any case, at the end of a ritual, they will hold a sacrificial dagger high in their hand that has the Horn Hunter that I showed you at the beginning of the series, that has the Horn Hunter carved on the handle, and they make a pledge to Mother Goddess in the name of the Horn Hunter. So this is also one of the growing occult groups in the United States of America. These are actually Druids. Druids are probably the second oldest form of Satanism in the whole world. They also meet once a year at Stonehenge, where they have their very bizarre rituals. This is a very elite and sophisticated group, and a very secret group. Many of the members of this group are law enforcement people and politicians and business people of great wealth. This is a very sophisticated group that you hear very little about. Although they're very prominent in Europe, they're also very powerful in the United States. The Worldwide Church of Satanic Liberation, the man you're looking at on the screen right now, happens to be Paul Valentine, the founder of the Worldwide Church of Satanic Liberation. He believes in Satan as God, and he tries to say that Satan is merely symbolic of his belief system, but he actually believes that Satan is God. They also believe that Christ is going to return the second time, and they also believe that when he returns, he will probably set up his rule and reign upon the earth, but Satan is going to come back with him. This is a 1 page out of an 8-page membership application they mailed out a couple of years ago to about 10 million people, and they received back in the mail applications for 1 million members. What you're looking at now is a scene from a guru or Maharaji lecturing concerning Eastern mysticism. Now, stay with me on this, because I don't want to lose you, and I don't want you to let your mind go to sleep as we think about the 1960s when the doctrine and the teaching of Eastern mysticism crept into the United States through the Maharajas and the gurus, and literally hundreds and thousands of young people were swept into this belief system. And when they were swept into this belief system, they then began to believe in outer body experiences. They began to believe in channeling. They began to believe in the power of the crystals and the power of the pyramid. They began to believe very strongly in what is known as the New World Order. You remember in the 60s the Hare Krishna. Krishna is a Sanskrit word for God. Avatar is actually the Sanskrit word, avatar, which means a trinity or a deity. And Krishna was one of these Eastern mystic gods that was incarnate in the flesh. And this group recruited hundreds and thousands of our young people into their occult belief system. Now, here's what you need to understand. Many of these young people in the 60s who were swept into this occult belief system of Eastern mysticism are now leaders of the New Age movement that we see establishing what is called the New World Order today. This is a flaming goat head, which is a symbol of neo-paganism. You notice the flames. This is one, by the way, of 4 goat heads that was placed around a high school campus in Arkansas, and someone had broken into the school building and wrote pagan all over the walls. And they thought maybe it was just vandalism, but what the investigation turned up was the fact that a neo-pagan group had actually established themselves in that town, and this was rather notification that they were there, and they were going to begin recruiting young people and other people into their church and into their belief system. Lycanthropy. Lycanthropy is a very bizarre belief system. They believe that the ultimate symbol of the beast that lurks in the sub-basement of the minds of the chosen is the wolf or some other large, vicious animal. It is called wolfery. In Germany, it was first called radio wolf. Now, what you're looking at on the screen now is a symbol of what they believe. They believe that man can turn into a wolf or can turn into a beast. That is why sometimes in some of the occult-related crimes that I've been associated with in the investigation, children have been eaten. Because they believe the person that committed the crime believed that he was an animal, and therefore he consumed the young people. Now, this is a transformation, lycanthropic transformation. But what I want you to see and understand more than anything else is that the symbol of lycanthropy happens to be the teeth. And anytime you see teeth that is reflected in a poster, or even if it is in an album cover like the one Ozzy Osbourne has. Teeth reflect a belief system in lycanthropy or wolfery. And there are a number of wolfery clubs all over the United States that young people become involved in. And their belief system is rather bizarre, and their behavior is often very criminal and damaging. Adolf Hitler, according to all of the occult history that I've been able to research, was fascinated by the occult. He studied the occult, or religions of the dark side, in Vienna for 3 years. And this symbol that was called the swastika actually is one of the oldest occult symbols in the world. Adolf Hitler stood in front of what is known historically as the sword of destiny and made a pledge. It's the sword that supposedly pierced the side of Christ. And whoever possessed the sword would rule the world. And he stood in front of that sword and made a pledge and took an oath to Satan. This is before he returned to Germany and established the Third Reich and the SS. The SS that was worn on the sleeve of the German SS, that also is an occult symbol. And it is a fact that Adolf Hitler and those who were second and third and high in ranking command in the Third Reich would go up into the mountains once a month, and sometimes more often than that, but once a month, and become involved in an occult ritual. It is not ironic. It is not an accident that Adolf Hitler committed suicide on April the 30th, which is one of the highest holy days in the Church of Satan and occult belief system. Drugs and the occult. Noriega, arrested by the government and was recently put on trial for drug peddling. And I show you this simply to emphasize the fact that you cannot separate drugs from the occult. I have met many druggies who were not involved in the occult, but I've never met anyone involved in the occult who's not involved in drugs. They go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. When Noriega was arrested, they wondered what in the world, the arresting officers wondered what in the world this rather unusual scene was. Well, it's the Santeria altar. The Santeria emblems and patron saints were present. In the closet where Noriega was sleeping was a huge picture of Adolf Hitler with the books of Hitler's belief system underneath the picture. In his pocket were 3 patron saints. And then after Noriega, and he did experience a conversion. One of my friends, evangelist from Longview, Texas, went to Miami and led him to Christ in his jail cell. After he was led to Christ and did a story, and it was released in I believe the UP or AP picked the story up. In the middle of the story, it said Noriega was a member of the Santeria Church. He was involved in the occult. You cannot separate drugs and the occult. And we're going to get into that just a little bit later. But folks, I'll tell you honestly, the reason I do this type of a seminar and provide you with this type of information is because they want our kids. All of these groups want our children and our grandchildren. The younger the body, the purer the blood, the more righteous the sacrifice as far as they're concerned. They want our children. They want your grandchildren. And what you're seeing on the screen during this seminar is designed to help protect you and to protect your children.
In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, the king of the world, I command the forces of darkness to bestow their infernal power upon me. Open wide the gates of hell and...
In Pasadena, Texas, Gloria Satania Nasatanata is about to give herself to the devil. She's being baptized into the Church of Satan.
I wanted to because I love Satan and because I want to do his will.
Cast off thy white robe of lies and comfort, thy prince revealed as those once began life, undraped and unshamed.
You are my indulgence. Come indulge with me.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
We're now going to talk about rituals. And the film you just got through viewing was not a Hollywood production. Those were not Hollywood actors and actresses. But that was a real initiation rite or ritual that was taking place in the Church of Satan in Pasadena, Texas. That was filmed, by the way, by the award-winning Channel 13 news team in Houston, Texas. Before we get into the rituals, let me try to explain to you that there are really 4 levels of Satanism. You have dabblers, you have the religious Satanist, and you have the non-traditional Satanist or the self-styled Satanist, and then the generational. The generational Satanists are those who become involved because of family involvement. The non-traditional are those self-styled who are the ones that commit so many of the crimes you read about in the newspaper and see in the media. The religious Satanists are those who are Satanist or a member of an occult group by religious conviction. But the most dangerous level of all are the fringers and the dabblers. These are the kids, the young people, who become involved because of peer pressure, because they're lonely, because they're looking for a role model, because they're looking for a hero, because they're looking for a belief system, something or someone to believe in. And so they become involved. And the rituals that are performed within these occult groups are performed for a purpose. Matter of fact, they have a 3-fold purpose. Number one, it is to promote the craft. Number two, it is to protect the secrets. And number three, it is to perpetuate the belief system. So when we're talking about the rituals that are being performed, and there are different kinds, when we talk about them, then you'll understand that they are to promote, protect, and to perpetuate the belief system. A few minutes ago, I talked about the reporter from Channel 4 who was able to film the Church of Satan in Fort Worth, but he had to do so in the dark. Well, the film that you are now, the slide rather, that you are now viewing is from that film. What you're seeing is a young man in the left-hand corner who's just a shadow of a figure. But he has on a white robe and a red sash, and there are the larger shadows that you see to the right that you're now viewing are the adults. They're standing inside of what we call, or what they call, a 9-foot circle, which is a magic circle. They hold a knife to the young man or the initiant's throat, and they ask the question, how do you enter the circle? He says, in love and faith and agreement. Then he steps on the inside of the circle, and then the initiation ritual begins. It can be any one of a number of initiation rituals that take place, because there's not just one ritual, there are any number of them. So whichever one they select is the one that they will be using in that incident. But the important thing is to understand the significance of what they call the magic circle, the 9-foot circle. You know, there are some people who have the idea that those involved in the occult are a bunch of weirdos and a bunch of freaks, but that's not so. There are a lot of people involved in the occult and Church of Satan who are lawyers and doctors and nurses, and those involved in the occult who are involved in law enforcement. Like the people you're now viewing on the screen, a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, people of intelligence, and yet they become involved in these bizarre religious belief systems and actually participate in their rituals that are designed to perpetuate and promote their craft. This is a ritual that is being performed by a Wiccan high priestess. She holds a dagger in her hand. There is a man, a member of the church, male member of the church, who is kneeling in front of her, holding fruit in their hand. And this is about to become what you and I in the Judeo-Christian ethic would call a sacrament, a sacramental type ritual. There are young people who become involved generationally. They are born into Satanism, and in this particular scene, here is a young person who was raised in a Church of Satan. Mother and dad were Satanists, and now this is a generational initiation rite in the Church of Satan. They perform weddings, they perform funerals, and they have some very sophisticated and very bizarre sex rituals that they are involved in. Many of their rituals are done in the nude. What you're looking at right now happens to be a ritual that is being performed by a group of Satanists who have adopted some of the Egyptian or Eastern mysticism belief system. They have adopted it into their belief system, and they're kneeling in front of an altar, reading out of a ritual book, preparing to observe some type of an occult ritual. Whenever a very sophisticated ritual is performed, like the one you're looking at on the screen now, there are two circles which reflects sophistication. The 5-pointed upside-down star. There will be a candle placed on each corner of each point of the star. The initiant will stretch himself out, spread eagle in the middle of the star. And if you will observe carefully, his body is spread eagle so that his arms and his legs and his head actually form the shape of that star. In doing so, his body then becomes an altar. The members of the occult group of the Church of Satan will stand around the outside of the circle and sprinkle blood, throw blood on his body, and it will be both animal and human blood. This was taken as a result of an occult-related crime investigation where some drug peddlers were involved in the occult. And as you can see, the circle with the star and with the candles on each point of two of the points of the star. This is a third-level Wiccan ritual. In this particular ritual, a man will lie on top of a woman on in the middle of the magic circle. He will recite an incantation. She will kiss him on every fifth line of the incantation. When they are through, they get up, stand to their feet. He is a priest, she is a priestess. They can go separate ways and actually form their own covens, or they can go together and form one coven. But this is the highest level Wiccan ritual that we have on record. This is they indulge in sex rituals in the nude that are very bizarre, but probably one of the most unusual, one of the most unusual rituals is done in a graveyard, often by young people. This is an initiant, a young person being initiated into a church. Shrouded in white, quarters over the eyes are sealed with wax, the mouth is sealed with wax, the ears are sealed with wax. The grave is dug up, the coffin is opened, the initiate then is lowered inside of the coffin with whoever is there. They draw a circle around the outside of the grave and perform their ritual, and then they bring the person, the initiate, out of the grave, take the wax off of the eyes, which symbolically says, I'll only see what Satan wants me to see. The wax out of the ears, which says, I will only hear what Satan wants me to hear. The wax off of the mouth, which symbolically says, I will only speak what Satan wants me to speak. That level of commitment to Satan and that level of commitment to the church of Satan is something that you and I as children of God ought to envy as a level of commitment for our young people to the Lord Jesus Christ. This is, by the way, a ritual that is also known as the new birth. In the Santeria Church, nothing is symbolic. They believe in real blood, real human sacrifice. This is the initiation rite of a member of the Santeria Church. A chicken is killed, a young initiant's head is shaved, and the blood of the chicken is poured over the head of the young man. This is an initiation rite of a priest in the Santeria Church. The high priest, dressed all in black, with a number of strings around his neck that are actually holding at the end of them Santeria patron saints. In the corner of his mouth there is a whistle. In his hand there is a very sharp knife. There's a dead animal, a huge animal, a horse or cow nailed against the wall. At the bottom there is a young man who is going to be initiated as a Santeria priest. The Santeria high priest will blow the whistle, summoning demonic powers and demonic forces into the room. Those that are members of the Santeria Church standing around in the room will actually clap their hands and chant, summoning demonic powers and demonic forces. And then when the evidence is there of the demonic power and demonic forces, the high priest will take that sharp knife and cut open the stomach of the animal, and all of the entrails of the animal and the blood of the animal will flow down over the body of the young man who is being literally baptized with blood and becoming a Santeria priest. A priest in Santeria, the baptism of blood. Now we're going to talk about sites, where they do what they do when they do them. This is a scene in the hill country, and let me explain to you that normally the Satanists and the occult people like to have seclusion, and they like to have privacy when they are organizing a site for their rituals. This was a very sophisticated site. As you can tell, there are two circles, as I've pointed out to you before, that indicates sophistication. You can also tell that there are some of the rocks that are higher than the other rocks, and the officer is walking through a clearing that constitutes kind of a doorway. On this particular site, there was both evidence of human blood and animal blood, where there had been both human and animal sacrifice. It had been there a long time. They probably thought that the site would never be discovered because it was so secluded. But it was a major occult-related site. The markings on the rocks around the site indicated that it was indeed a satanic site, with the pentagram and the 666 and the backward crescent moon with the star, all indicating that it was indeed a satanic site. The policeman is standing at the top of a five-pointed upside-down star pointing to the upside-down cross. Now, this is in a larger town, outside of a larger town, and if you follow the point of that star, if you were on the site and followed the point of that star, this is what you would find at the bottom of it. Where they had performed a ritual, the rocks were in a circle, one rock was removed, and there was a rock left in the middle which indicated there had been an animal sacrifice there. Some people may not think that this is a very significant site, but to me it is, and the reason is because this particular site had a Holy Bible. And they sometimes do take a Holy Bible to a site because they tear the pages out and eat them, swallow them, and then sometime in the course of the ritual, they will actually vomit them up and vomit on the pages of the Bible in order to desecrate the Word of God. All that is left of the animal in this particular sacrifice is just 2 or 3 small pieces, and you can see in the corner here the handmade upside-down cross that was left there. This is a grave that had been disturbed where they had performed a ritual and dug up the corpse in order to get some bones to use in their ritual. This is a site in a large town where they were offering animal sacrifices. This is a site in the country where they were actually peddling drugs, and the drug group was associated with the occult. Even the house they were in had on the door of the garage a huge pentagram. And then on the inside of the house, you could see on the walls the pentagram, the S, which stands for Satan, and the heavy metal posters and that reflect the occult involvement. And this was a drug group in an East Texas town that was involved in the occult, as is often the case. This is one of my least favorite slides. I get a little irate when I look at this because that is a sign of anarchy. The sign of anarchy is a sign of rebellion. And this reflects the attitude of most occult groups. I hate cops. They, as a matter of fact, hate any symbol of authority, whether it is law enforcement or the ministry or the church or whatever it is. These are scenes from some sites on an abandoned road. These caverns of this bridge were used for occult sacrifices and occult rituals. A hexagram, not a Star of David, but a hexagram, that is a Star of David with a circle around it, before known as the Seal of Solomon. Anytime you see a hexagram, you can be relatively sure that there had been a human sacrifice. In another wooded area, only 150 yards from a high school, it was interesting to find this site because the young people from the high school had been using it, we discovered, for a very long time. Over in this corner, there are 3 posts. You see 2 there, and if you followed that further over, you would see another 3rd post. Now, on those 3 posts, they would take this piece of concrete, which is round, and place it, and it would form an altar. On that altar, they would perform both human and animal sacrifices to some degree. This is another closer look at the site. This is the view coming in from the high school. It is almost a very natural entryway, a very beautiful natural entryway that provides a lot of concealment. They will set up sites in large cities where they find an abandoned building. They will often paint a skull, and then in the area of the mouth, they will dig out the wall and make a place where they can burn animals as a sacrifice. And sacrifices are common, whether they are dabblers or whether they are serious Satanists. Sacrifices. We're going to talk about sacrifice. I've used the term several times, and I'm going to quickly run through some of these sacrifices. What you're looking at now, a couple of police officers who are investigating what we call a Santeria package. The Santeria package consists of small animals that have been killed, or a small animal that has been killed, wrapped in another animal's skin into a ball. If a person becomes a threat to a Santeria church or a Santeria group, they will place this as a death notice on their porch or in their car or somewhere in their house so they can see it, maybe in a locker at school. So if you see something like this, it is not so bizarre that it does not have meaning. To the Santerias, it means that it is actually a death notice. This is a cat that was used in a sacrifice. This is from an evidence file. They used all of the inside of the cat. On this particular one, they only used the tail of the cat. In this particular one, they actually extracted the heart from the cat and used only the heart in their ritual. This is all that is left of a cat. They used all the entrails, plus they drained the blood from the animal. And they often only drain blood. In this scene, this crime scene, only the blood was drained from this small animal and used in the sacrifice. This is a larger animal. You notice the animals are getting larger. They used all of the entrails plus drained the blood. This is all that is left of a calf that was used in a ritual. And you will observe in this one where they had actually extracted the heart, taken the heart, surgically removed the heart. And this is all that is left of a pig that was used, where they had actually surgically removed the heart. And this is all that is left of a very large German Shepherd dog that was used in a Santeria ritual. This happens to be a high priest. Would not allow his face to be photographed, but this is a high priest wearing a red robe. Red robe equals black mass. Black mass equals a human sacrifice. In his hand there is a sacrificial dagger. At the bottom there is actually the cauldron out of which he drinks blood. This is the sacrificial dagger. You notice there's a copper penny. Copper penny represents the value of life to the Satanist and most occult groups. What you are now viewing is not a Hollywood scene. This is a real ritual that is performed by an occult group in California that believe they found the secret to life and the secret to death by eating the dead. This is a very bizarre, a very cold-blooded ritual. But it is happening. Scenes like this are happening all over the United States of America. And it's doing a great deal of damage, not only physical damage, but it's doing a great deal of mental and emotional damage. And I'm going to get into that and the emotional damage that is done to these young people a little bit later. But these are some of the sacrificial rituals and rites that some of these bizarre groups go through, and they bond them to their leader. After having viewed something as bizarre as you've just seen, parents often ask me the question, how in the world do young people get involved, and why in the world would they ever want to get involved in anything so heinous as what we've just seen? I'm going to talk to you now about what we call hooks and attractions. How do young people get involved? Where do they get the information? And why in the world would they ever become involved in things like this? Before I give you the hooks and attractions as we understand them, let me just first tell you that every cult and occult group operates in three ways. This is their method of operation. Method of operation of cult to cult. All of them are the same. They were the same in the Bible. They're the same now. They've never changed. First of all, they use manipulation. Secondly, intimidation. And thirdly, the manipulation and intimidation is designed to arrive and intended to arrive at domination. First of all, they manipulate. Now, what I'm going to show you in just a few moments are those elements that are built into recruiting and rituals that are for the purpose of manipulating young people. Young people often are emotionally starved. They're neglected by their family. They're looking for identity. They're hungry for acceptance. They want to be a part of something. They need a hero. They need someone to look up to. And so all of these things I'm getting ready to go into are what we call tools of manipulation for the cult and the occult. Now, another interesting thing is that they use, after they manipulate them into the system, then they use what we call intimidation. They intimidate them through the rituals and through their participation in rituals. Sometimes they take pictures of them. If they want out, if it gets a little too far out for them, if they're getting more than they bargained for and they want out, for instance, maybe the leader will say, you're going to have to become involved in necrophilia, which is sex with the dead. And often they perform rituals that involve the dead. So they say, you're going to have to go to the graveyard. We're going to become involved in a necrophilia ritual. And the young people back up and said, no, not me. I'm not going that far. Then they'll pull out the photographs or the pictures they've taken with a video camera and show them to the kids and say, would you like for me to give these to your parents or to the police or some other authority figures? And they intimidate them by saying, we'll turn this over to the authorities. Or they say, I'm going to kill your mother, your dad, your brother, your sister. That they will intimidate them in some way into staying in the occult group. After they do that, they arrive at what we call the third level in the shackle of occult involvement, and that is domination. But first of all, there is manipulation. Now, I'm going to give you the 8 elements that the occult uses. Initially, I'm going to just give them to you, then we're going to refer to them briefly, that the occult uses in their recruiting and in their manipulation. There are 8 of them: heavy metal music, videos, fantasy role-playing games, comic books, sex, power that is reflected by symbols of power, cartoons, and drugs. First of all, there's heavy metal music, and I am going to tell you that heavy metal music is probably the most effective tool the occult has ever used in recruiting young people and to get their message across. Now, I know some of you say, well, wait a minute, you are merely bad-rapping heavy metal music. Not only heavy metal music, but death metal music, which is a coming phenomenon among young people today. Let me just tell you that I believe that heavy metal music is music from the dark side for 3 reasons. I could give you many, but just 3 reasons. Number 1, because the occult says so. In occult leadership meetings, in strategy meetings. For example, the meeting they had in October of 1990, when they formed their strategy for the 90s, the occult leadership in the Americas and Europe, when they were forming their strategy, they honored heavy metal artists, heavy metal distributors, and heavy metal promoters because they said that your music gets our message out better than any other music. So they have adopted the heavy metal music of the dark side, as their music. And then another reason I believe is because heavy metal artists themselves say that they are Satanists and occult members and involved in not just Satanism, but some other cults. The young artist you're looking at now is involved in voodoo. And then I'm going to give you the third reason a little bit later on. But going to Ozzy Osbourne with his teeth showing and his blazing personality promotes Satanism in more ways than one. Iron Maiden, another group that promotes Satanism. Warfare with their symbols of demons and snakes with demonic heads on them on their album covers. And this particular album cover, notice the question mark on the horse. That is really known, that's an occult symbol, that is really known as the Roman cross, or the cross of Nero, that was originally created in order to cause Christians to question their faith in God and question their faith in the Word of God. Here's a heavy metal artist hanging on a cross with a goat head in mockery of the death of the Lord Jesus Christ. Kiss and Rip now doing concerts together, and this is one of their promotional posters, and at their own admission they say that they are a match made in hell, and I couldn't agree with them more because their music is certainly demonic. Hell Awaits, another another fantastic song that is loved and revered by the heavy metal artists put out by Slayer. This particular album is found in a lot of teenage suicide scenes. Another Slayer album, Wasp, is another one of the popular groups that promotes Satanism. Of course, King Diamond, you know what, you've got to give this guy credit, because he openly says, I am a Satanist. My music is for Satan, and my concerts are for Satan, and if you don't like it, then don't come to my concerts and don't buy my albums, because I am a Satanist. He makes no bones about it. ACDC are a blood cult. Ozzy Osbourne promotes not only the occult, but he also promotes drugs with the use of some of his posters where it says, just say Ozzy, and down at the bottom it says, and don't take no for an answer. This is a tabloid put out by the heavy metal industry. Wasp, AC/DC, Motley Crue, all identified as blood cults. Venom with the pentagram. Black Sabbath with the demon on the front of the album. Another album cover and that was converted into a poster with a woman hanging on a cross and the demons there. And mother, daddy, grandma, grandpa, how would you like for your daughter to bring this gentleman home for dinner? Now, you laugh about that, but let me tell you something. Did you know that every time they bring his music home, they are bringing him home? You see, the young people are being taught by these heavy metal artists. Their belief system is being pumped into their brain by these heavy metal artists. And somebody's going to teach your children. And this is who you're allowing to teach your children. This is who they're listening to. Diary of a Madman with the upside down cross, Ozzy Osbourne. Another heavy metal poster that is connected with Halloween. Here's a lycanthropy heavy metal poster with the teeth showing and the almost nude woman sitting in the demon's mouth. But what is rock music really and truly saying? This is my third reason. There is a very popular organization that is secular, and it is not a Christian organization. It is not a bunch of Bible-thumping fundamentalists who holler and scream, but there is an organization known as the Parents Music Resource Center, secular organization. They paid a great deal of money to have psychiatrists and psychologists research heavy metal lyrics. Here are some lyrics, for example, the title of which is Kill Yourself. Kill yourself. And when you get all the way down to the chorus, it says, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. Now, I'm going to admit to you that if an emotionally stable young person listens to that, they're not going to run out and commit suicide. However, a lot of young people are not emotionally stable. When they're having problems and they listen to music like this, then they end up committing suicide. And this is what the Parents Music Resource Center was saying. And as a result of the study that was done by the Parents Resource Center, there were 5 conclusions drawn by the secular psychiatrists and psychologists. Now, these 5 secular psychiatrists said heavy metal music reflects, number 1, the abuse of drugs and alcohol. Number 2, encourages suicide. Number 3, it has graphic violence. Number 4, heavy metal music has a fascination with the occult. And number 5, it has a sexuality that is graphic and explicit. I agree with them 100%. Listen to the sights and the sounds of this particular heavy metal song about a human sacrifice. Number 1, heavy metal music. Number 2, books and literature. You do not have to go to an occult bookstore to find books. Most of the books on the occult I buy out of a secular bookstore, right out of a mall. But the young people are fascinated by what they're reading. For instance, the Necronomicon, which is a very popular book among young people. It is a book of the dead. And it is a very frank discussion of the occult and occult belief system. This book, The Witch's Modern Handbook, I picked up in an investigation. Actually, it was a marijuana investigation in our county. Was given to me by my sheriff, a young man who was in jail, and it still has the paper clips in it. Where the young man had been reading the book and studying it, and the sheriff asked me to read it and analyze it, and I did. And he said, "What do you think the young man's going to do when he gets out of jail?" I said, "He's either going to commit homicide and get involved in necrophilia, or he's going to commit suicide." My sheriff said, "How do you know?" I said, "Because it's in this book." He read it, and he's got it all marked up inside of this book. This is a book about magic spells. This is these are just numbers and numbers of occult books that young people buy and adults buy when they go into these regular bookstores. Now, folks, I am not talking about occult bookstores. Here's a complete book on witchcraft. I'm not talking about occult bookstores. I'm talking about bookstores in the mall. But when they read these books and when they see these books, they find out how to perform the rituals and how to become involved in the occult. Number two, they find out through magazines, and the magazines you're now looking at happen to be heavy metal magazines, but they're not the only ones. Here is a rag, you know, the ones you buy in the grocery store, and in the back of it there are classified ads. Look at some of them. Some of them I have marked: astrology and the occult, free voodoo, voodoo spells, holy voodoo, powerful voodoo, free occult literature, occult powers, magic, seeking wealth, occult supplies, the world's largest occult supplier, One Magic. All of these can be ordered, and many of them free of charge by the young people. And so they order this material, and they begin to read about them, and they also order occult paraphernalia from these heavy metal magazines and these rags, and they're very accessible to them even in the bookstores. Comic books. The comic book that you are now looking at, I bought in a drugstore in Lufkin, Texas. I was leaving because I love hamburgers, and they serve good hamburgers in that drugstore. And I had been talking to some folks and having a meeting in there and eating a hamburger. And we went out, and there were a group of young people, kids actually, standing around a rack reading comic books. I said, I want to see what they're reading. So I went over, and what I'm about to show you are the comic books these children were reading. Children. Some of them sitting on the floor. Here's one that has a young person tied down in the middle of a pentagram, and the other young people offering that young person as a sacrifice. On the inside of the magazine, there is a woman hanging on a cross. Her body has been beaten, and this is what the kids were reading. Here's another one they were reading. A man sitting at a table, and on the plate in front of him are two children, two babies tied together, and he's getting ready to eat them. Don't show you the inside, because on the inside he does eat them. In this comic book they were reading, not only does it promote Satanism, but it also promotes nudity or pornography and the use of drugs. They make no bones about it. And I'll tell you something else, folks. It is an insult to your intelligence to think that anyone who looks like this can have 6 movies made about him and be accepted by the public. It should be an insult to your intelligence and my intelligence. But the comic books are a fascinating way and a very subtle way for the occult to get their message out to the children and the young people. Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy role-playing games, another popular tool of the Satanists to get their message out. They emphasize occult worship. They emphasize occult methods. They emphasize suicide, murder, violence, all of these things. Another very accessible method for young people learning about the occult happens to be videos that you can rent in just about any video store. The Believers that you're looking at right here was required viewing for the Santeria occult group down in Matamoros. But these that are so easily rentable at video stores and at convenience stores all over the country, young people actually view them and learn how to perform rituals and learn how to believe the things that the occult people are attempting to teach them. Then they learn from the Ouija board and from tarot cards and fortune tellers. And you say, well, that's only a game. I'll tell you the story about that Ouija board in just a moment. And then from the sinister and the very deceptive cartoons that your children are watching. You need to be careful what your children watch in the form of cartoons on television.
According to some, you can no longer have your child watch cartoons without having them exposed to demons, wizards, spells, spirits, magic, and other occult practices. Experts in the area believe that many cartoon shows produced today are just mini introduction courses into the occult, and many hundreds of thousands of kids are being conditioned right in their own living rooms.
Drugs are another hook. They offer the kids, the young people, all the drugs they want. And the kids living in the moral climate that we're in, they freely and willingly accept the drugs because of peer pressure and because also it's an acceptable part of their belief system. Sex. They offer them sex. All the sex you want. In this particular investigation, they had a sex room set up where the young people would go in and have any kind of sex they want. She, he, me, we, us, them, they, any kind of sex you want. You can have all of it you want and no one's going to object to it because that's part of the belief system and the lifestyle. And then power, the promise of power that is reflected by the occult symbols. And there are so many of them. They wear them on their clothing, they have them on their books at school, they have them hanging on the wall of their house. But the kids are surrounded by these symbols that represent power because they want power. And so many people have the idea that just because they're wearing these cute little symbols that they don't really mean anything. But let me tell you about these symbols. They were not there just by accident. They were not created just as a marketing tool or just a marketing product. All of these bizarre symbols that these people are wearing in the form of jewelry and on their uniform, did you know that they actually attract demonic power? That's what they're designed to do. You put them on your body and demonic power is attracted to you through these symbols of power, these occult symbols. This young lady right here, incidentally, has on a bracelet with the pentagram, which is a powerful attraction for demonic powers and demonic forces. They wear them around their neck. This is one of the more popular and they think one of the more beautiful occult symbols, but it attracts demonic power and demonic forces. A 666, which is people know as the mark of the beast, but it is not always used just as a satanic mark. Sometimes it is actually used in graffiti to show where a particular church, a cult or satanic church, is going to meet. The House of Satan, a very popular group of young people all over the United States, use it as a sign to show where they're going to be meeting when they have their rituals. The graffiti is used everywhere. This particular wall that you're now looking at was in Midlothian, Texas, or I should say outside Midlothian, Texas. Remember the Ouija board I showed you a while ago? Well, it was at the bottom of this wall. And let me tell you just a quick story. There was a drug ring in Midlothian, Texas. The police chief did not have an undercover agent, so a young police officer volunteered to infiltrate the high school to find out where the drugs were coming from. But he found out that it was not only a drug ring, but it was also a young satanic church comprised of young people. He infiltrated it. He knew it was there. And the leader of the church finally found out one day, a couple of months later, that he was an undercover agent. He went to the leader of the group went to the house out in the country where this wall is and asked the Ouija board what to do. Now, folks, listen. Believe it or not, the Ouija board told him to kill the police officer. It spelled out K-I-L-L. K-I-L-L. And when it spelled out K-I-L-L, the young man said, how? And it spelled out shoot. So the young man called the young undercover agent and said, I'm going to go make a drug buy. You want to go? Well, naturally he wanted to go. So they picked him up, drove 3 miles out in the country, sat down on the back of a pickup truck, and the young satanic leader said, turn on some metal. And when the young police officer, Raphael, got up to go turn on some heavy metal music they could listen to, the young satanic priest and drug peddler reached into his shirt, pulled out a pistol, shot him. When he hit the ground, he shot him again. I want to ask you a question. Does that look like a satanic priest, young man who killed this police officer? His instructions came from Satan. What you have to understand is that that in the occult, they operate 80% in the spiritual and 20% in the physical. You and I in the Judeo-Christian ethic operate 20% in the spiritual and 80% in the physical. This police officer would have been alive had it been just a normal drug operation. Sometimes when I'm dealing with parents and the issue of the occult, I tell them if you have a son or a daughter who has a sign on their door that says, keep out, private turf, don't come in my room, this is my room, you're not welcome. Take that sign off and go in the room and find out what's there. First of all, they don't have the right to tell you that. That is your room. And that is not their room. They're merely using that room. Go in and find out what is there. Then if you find anything unusual, call the sheriff or call the police department. One mother did that after a seminar I was conducting, and she found this ritual robe, and she found this particular mask that is used in a ritual. She found this sacrificial dagger. She found this voodoo doll, and she found this list and painting on the wall. The list you're looking at on the wall at the top is a list of 13 parents with a date out beside each name when they were going to die, and the list at the bottom of the screen is a death pact that the young men had made that they were going to kill themselves once they had done away with their parents. Well, the sheriff of that county went and got the boy out of school, spent about 3 hours with him, and the young man pulled out of the occult. I'm happy to report that the parents are all still alive, and so are the boys still alive. We're now going to be talking about occult-related ritualistic crimes, that is, crimes that are committed in the name of Satan all over the United States of America. Police officers are going to special training schools trying to find out how to intelligently and discerningly investigate occult-related ritualistic crimes, which is a relatively new field as far as investigators are concerned, criminal justice is concerned. I receive letters in my office from professionals all over the United States asking for help, asking for our publications. I receive phone calls from detectives discussing with me their occult-related homicides or abuse cases. Sheriff's departments contact me to review evidence files to find out what can and can be used in evidence as in an occult-related abuse case or a homicide case. So all over the United States, there are occult-related crimes. In small towns and large towns, medium-sized towns, they're everywhere. No community is excluded. There is a possibility for them to crop up just about anywhere. Of course, one of the most famous cases in the United States, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who mutilated 13 women, raped them, and then mutilated them, told them while he was raping them that they should scream, "Hail Satan." When he was found guilty at his trial, he had the pentagram tattooed in his hand, walked out of the courtroom holding his hand up saying, "Hail Satan." Pete Rowland, the young man on the right, another one who was, as a teenager, involved in Satanism with many of his friends, became involved in rituals, first of all, with small animals. Then, after about a year, went out in the woods and became involved in human sacrifices. They took one of their own group and put him on the ground and beat him to death with baseball bats while he was screaming and hollering, blood flying everywhere, screaming and hollering, "I love Satan, I love Satan." Henry Lee Lucas, whom I know, I have an oil painting in my office done by Henry Lee Lucas, very famous. First of all, there are some law enforcement agencies that said he committed 316 homicides. I personally don't think he did. One guy said he only committed 100. And I said, well, we probably ought to let him out of jail then if he only committed 100. But there are a lot of mysterious things about this guy. And I was just being facetious, by the way. But there are a lot of mysterious things about this guy. But there's one thing for sure we know. He was a member of a group out of Florida, organized group out of Florida, known as the Hand of Death. The high priest of this training school for death is known as the Hand of Satan, and the group is called the Hand of Death. He was trained there. We know that he was involved in kidnappings and selling children across the border, and he, at his own admission, knew about Matamoros before Matamoros ever existed. This young man was arrested because he abducted this young lady in a suburb of Chicago. She had ran away from home, was picked up on the streets by the man I just showed you. She became involved in his satanic cult. After a few weeks, she became the sacrifice. They mutilated her body. He cut off her head and then cut down the back of her head and peeled the flesh off, and was going to save her face, the skin off of her face, for a mask and another ritual. Put her head in a Ziploc bag and threw it away, and 2 ladies found it, took it to the sheriff, and the sheriff traced it back to that house, and that is an ongoing investigation, but it was occult related. She was killed during the process of a ritual. 15-year-old runaway. There are many runaways. This young man, Kenneth, a friend of mine, I visited him in prison. He was known as the Friday the 13th killer. During his spree, he had been previously involved in any number of occult belief systems, voodoo, witchcraft, any number of belief systems. But he became fascinated with death. He was briefly into Dungeons and Dragons, but the videos, Faces of Death, and some of the other death videos became his teacher. And he was fascinated with death. Finally, on Friday the 13th, a couple of years ago, he made a list of people he was going to kill. He took the first young man out to a house in the country and killed him in a ritual. And then he went to the home of the high school principal, and the high school principal would not open the door at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he shot through the door and almost killed the principal of the high school as a part of his Friday the 13th crime spree. And the principal of the high school did survive, and he was transferred from the Panhandle town, one of the Panhandle towns in Texas, into a school in East Texas, and he is still principal there. And I've talked with him, visited with him personally, as I have visited with the young man who is doing life in prison for committing the crime. But it was all done because of his fascination with death after having become involved in the occult. This is a church, Colonial Hills Baptist Church in Tyler, Texas, where some Satanists broke in, desecrated the Word of God, desecrated the Bible, and then removed the sacrament table and performed a ritual. And after they got through performing the ritual, they actually burned the church down. This is a letter from the pastor testifying that it was indeed an occult related incident where the occult not only performed the ritual but burned the church. Did $1 million worth of damage to the church. I'm talking about occult-related crimes. Psychiatric hospitals set up treatment units for Satanists, young people who become involved. No young person can become involved without being hurt emotionally and spiritually. The negative belief system promotes a negative behavior, negative personality. Therapists and medical specialists all over the country are actually going to seminars to learn how to treat what is now called satanic ritual abuse. There are many books written on the subject. There are many studies that have been done, and that has a very bizarre effect on the children who become victims. This is a drawing from a young lady who was taken to a play therapist. Let me quickly tell you the story. Her mother and dad got a divorce, and her mother and dad separated, living apart. Her dad got visitation rights. When her dad would come pick her up on the weekends, she would come home from the weekend visit disturbed, not able to sleep at night, having problems, and finally the mother took her to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist suggested they go to a play therapist. The play therapist is a professional who will allow you to draw the child to draw pictures, and they draw out of the child what's wrong through the pictures. These are some of the pictures. I have the whole case study on it, but you'll notice in this picture there is a third eye. The occult teaches that everyone has a third eye through which light enters. But you notice the teeth. In all of these drawings that the little girl did, there were teeth, the presence of teeth. There is a man putting a child on an altar. At the top there is a fire, and over here there's a man putting a little girl's feet in the fire. There's another drawing with the presence of teeth, and then back to the first drawing. Quickly. This is what the play therapist found out. She asked the child one day after several weeks of therapy, well, what do you do when you go visit Daddy? She said, we go to church, but not like Mama's church. What are they doing in this drawing, the therapist said. They're putting my friend's feet in the fire. Did they ever put your feet in the fire? No. What are they doing here? They're tying my friend to the table. Did they ever tie you to the table? No. Well, what do they do to you, Sandy? And Sandy stood up, put both of her hands over her private, and said, they bite me down here. They chew on me down here. This evidence was taken to the district attorney. The district attorney arrested the father, found out he was a member of a wolfery group or lycanthropy group. Visitation rights were suspended. The father, incidentally, got probation and had to go into treatment. This was about 2 years ago. About 3 or 4 months ago, I got a call from the aunt. The father was out of therapy and visitation rights had been restored. I think it's tragic, but nevertheless it's the truth. Cults that kill. This is actually what their motto is. If you find that your hands are still willing, then you can turn murder into art. This is a child who was offered as a human sacrifice. Notice how the body is cut up. Here the coroner is holding the child, and if you will observe, there are even hunks of flesh that have been cut out of the body of the child. The coroner said it took 6 hours for the child to die. The reason, because those involved in the group wanted to receive life force from the child. This is a baby. You'll notice bruises all over the body of the baby. The mother is doing time in a Texas prison. The bruises that are all over the baby were explained by the perpetrator, the mother, by saying, in your Bible, and this was her rationale, your Bible says that it pleased the Father to bruise the Son. So we took a hammer and bruised our baby and offered him as a sacrifice to our God, Satan. The ultimate possibility, young people, parents, listen to me very carefully. The ultimate possibility is suicide. When young people become depressed and want a way out, Ozzy Osbourne says, it is okay, go right ahead and take your own life. That is a window of opportunity, a window of escape. But depression sets in. Young people don't know which way to turn. They have nothing to turn to. Therefore, they begin to die, and there is no way in the world you're able to bring these young people back to life. They commit suicide, take their own life. This young man you're looking at now joined a satanic church, and his girlfriend wouldn't join, so he killed her and then killed himself. This young man became involved in an occult group somewhere in Arkansas. He could not handle it, so therefore he took a gun and killed himself. You'll notice the occult markings on his body with the backward question mark. Many things about the occult, all things about the occult is backwards. There's the upside down cross to him. A lot of the young people who become involved in the occult feel like there is no other way out. Some young people become involved in wolfery groups. They wear wolfery masks, which is, as I told you before, is a form of lycanthropy. And this is a very depressing experience that they go through. This is a suicide note that was written by a young man named Johnny. One day there was a boy named Johnny who was standing in front of the mirror playing his guitar while listening to Hell Awaits from Slayer, when all of a sudden the lights went out, a red glowing face appeared in the mirror. It was the devil. The devil said, Johnny, do you want to be the best guitar player in the world? Johnny said, yes, I do. Then give me your soul, the devil said. Johnny agreed. One day as Johnny later was on tour doing a solo, the red glowing face once again appeared and said, Johnny, it is time to come home. And so Johnny took a pistol and Johnny went home. This is the sleeve from the album I showed you earlier, Hell Awaits by Slayer, which the police incidentally never found, but that was Johnny's own handwriting on the back of his Hell Awaits album. Suicidal tendencies. They tell you that suicide is indeed the answer. Well, this young lady had, a 15-year-old girl, had this prayer of Satan in the front of her notebook. That N-A-T-A-S is Satan spelled backwards. And every morning when she went to school, she prayed this prayer to Satan. Some of you parents are saying, and rightly so, some of you pastors are saying, what can we do? Well, let me give you a quick 5-point program of prevention and protection. Number one, awareness through knowledge. That this is what you have gone through. You have just seen an overview of the cult, and your first step to protection is being aware that they're there and being aware of knowing what they can do. Number two, children and parents, you must make Jesus Christ the essential person in your life. He must become the Lord of your life. If He is not Lord, then you are vulnerable to the attack of Satan. Make Him the essential person in your life. Not the heavy metal artist, not the heavy metal music, not the video games, not your friends, but make Jesus Christ the essential person in your life. Let Him be your Lord, your shield, your protector. When He is your Lord, then He can protect you. So parents and children, make Jesus Lord. Number three, you must understand that parents and grandparents must get involved in the life of their children and their grandchildren. Care about them and communicate with them. You must understand you've got to get involved in the life of your children. Let me ask you a question. Do you know the name of your child's public school teacher? Some of you have never even been to your child's classroom. You've never been to a sports event with your child. You don't get involved in the life of your child. You don't go to church with them. You don't share anything with them at home. You do not get involved in the life of your child. You must get involved. Know who their friends are. Know who their friends are. Do you know their names? Do you know where they live? Do you know what they're doing? You must get involved in the life of your child. You say, well, if I did all that, then they wouldn't consider me their friend. Their buddy. You don't understand. I want to be their buddy. I want to be their friend. Let me tell you something, parents. They've got enough friends and buddies at school. What they need is a mama and a daddy who cares enough about them to become deeply involved in their life so that they can feel identified and feel accepted. And then number four, live a Spirit-controlled life. Your life must be filled with the Holy Spirit. And even as your hand fitting into a glove controls that glove, and the glove becomes under the control of your hand, even so must you be filled with the Spirit of God, so that the Spirit of God can control your life. You only become sensitive to the Spirit of God and the warnings of the Spirit of God and the teachings of the Spirit of God when you become under the control of the Spirit of God. Paul the Apostle said, be filled with the Spirit. It is a command of God that you be filled with the Spirit of God. And then number five, put on the whole armor of God. You've got to dress for the warfare. Put on the whole armor of God, the girdle of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, put the gospel of peace on your feet, get the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the word of God, and prayer. You need to cover your children with prayer. Pray over your children. Transfer the blessing from yourself and from God to your children. Lay hands on your children and pray for your children. Pray the protection of God. But you put on the whole armor of God. Young people to us, put on the whole armor of God, the girdle of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the peace of God on your feet, the shield of faith. I mean, put on the whole armor of God and leave it on. One fellow said to me, first thing I do when I get up in the morning, Paul, is put on the whole armor of God. I said, not me. He said, what do you do? I said, I sleep in mine. I don't take any chances. I don't want the devil getting to me even when I'm asleep. Put on the whole armor of God and live in the protection of the armor of God. Because you see, we Christians are at war. Not just covert war, but overt war. The occult wants your children. They, more than anything else in the world, want your children and want your grandchildren. The five points of prevention and protection that I've just given you can become your shield and can become the protection of your family against the onslaught of the occult and the lure of the occult. Start now training your children to love God, to respect God, to be filled with the Spirit of God, to respect the man of God, to respect the Bible. Teach them to do that. Love your children. Let them feel wanted and accepted and needed. And my prayer is that this video has given you such an insight that you will be aware of the enemy and you will have protection from God as a result of it. May God bless you richly.